So the Lynn Scott project is an interesting project. It's an original 1962 late mid-century modern house. And it's a beautiful piece of property right on Rock Creek Park. It was a house designed by an aerospace engineer. So it was a very interesting house, very quirky, not an architect, but had a lot of interesting components to the house. So aluminum color panels on the exterior and a range of color plumbing fixtures at the interior, kind of a very nice mix of sort of 60s playful design. Mark and Karen, the clients, are aficionados of mid-century modern. Karen is of Danish descent, and her family she spends a lot of time going back and forth, she and Mark traveling between Europe and the US, and they sought mid-century modern house that they could really kind of curate. And so they purchased this piece of property, and it was a beautiful piece of property in a beautiful location, a very interesting house with a story, but at the same time it was a house that had several challenges that needed to be overcome. And those challenges included things like weakened foundation system and mold, and most of the cabinetry and the baths and the kitchens were all original to the house. In addition to the house needing significant renovation, it also needed to be reconciled with the way that they choose to live today. So, meaning that in some ways, mid-century modern design kind of spoke to a different cultural time where the kitchen was very closed off. You know, there were gender divisions between who was doing what in the house, and those divisions don't exist anymore. Mark and Karen are both avid readers, and they really wanted to add a library to the house. And there were pretty severe zoning restrictions on how, the lot could be used. The only opportunity really to add on to the house was at the rear of the house, and there was a specific angle associated with that setback. And so we really sort of began to play with that setback and how we could create what Mark and Karen affectionately referred to as the Treehouse. So they really saw this library as an opportunity to create a room that was small enough that it was essentially all reclining surface, soft pillows, a large, sort of couch, sofa bed that they could lay on that would be flooded with light. And so that sort of marked the beginning of the exploration for that. At the same time, they had goals to create a sustainable design, and they enlisted the help of George Washington University students and a professor of sustainable design at the university. And the students did a study to evaluate opportunities for sustainable design at the house. So they were approaching it from an academic point of view, and at the same time, I was approaching it as a lead AP architect. I have a specialty in green design, sustainable design. So I was looking at it from a practical point of view, from a product point of view, while the students were looking at it kind of at a high level, carbon footprint level. Ultimately, cycling through the various aspects, the possibilities, determined that there were too many trees around to explore solar panels. There were some limitations on that. We looked at gray water recycling. We looked at wind possibility for renewable energy on site. Mark and Karen, through a process of elimination, we determined that geothermal heating and cooling would be the most effective thing that they could do to reduce their overall carbon footprint. Following this, I had already started a search for renewable materials that would be appropriate for the project. So we started looking at cork flooring and other opportunities to create natural ventilation. I knew that we would be stripping the exterior and applying a retrofitted smart wall to the exterior enclosure of the home. That means continuous insulation over the outside of the wood framing to really create a high R value. So the R value or insulation value of the exterior walls is an R30, so it's quite a high number. The R value of the roof is also significantly high at 50. And so although the house is not specifically qualifying as a passive house design, it employs many of the techniques of a passive house. It was really satisfying for Mark and Karen because that was their objective. And in fact, the students, this was a semester-long project, which the project culminated in a presentation showing what was ultimately done at the house. Finecraft was a really great partner in this because I knew from the start in speaking, Alexis was the lead for Finecraft, and I knew that in speaking with him, he was having a very strong interest in the details and going over with me what was the best way to wrap a new enclosure around an existing house, to create a lot of the custom cabinetry that we would at the interior, specifically in the spaces like this Treehouse library, and also the cypress cladding. We had a mill in North Carolina, specifically mill cypress cladding, and ship the cladding to the site. It was a really beautiful opportunity. And although there are probably materials that would be less maintenance and longer lasting, Mark and Karen, with my guidance, really made the commitment to materials that would allow for breathing, that would be natural materials that would potentially decay after we're long gone, so that we're not creating something that is plastic that will be here through all of time. And that extends right down to the insulation at the interior of the wall, which is a wool insulation as opposed to a fiberglass material, which is at the same time toxic for those that are doing the installation. There were many moments of collaboration, and many moments too where Alexis was simply willing to go above and beyond, when many other builders would have said no. It's a really satisfying project to see built, and Mark and Karen are really enjoying the many aspects that we really collaborated on. There's a white oak paneling and white oak flooring throughout, and there's a wonderful floating stair in the central hallway, and that stair takes you from the dominant space upstairs to the downstairs space. There is a Norwegian gas stove in the master bedroom, very warm and inviting space flooded with light. The way the light moves around the house we really captured this in the windows and their orientation. More than anything else, adding glass to the front of the house and the exterior of the glass has allowed the house to have a sort of transparency through to the Rock Creek Park at the back. Wall at the living room, the glass doors, they slide open, and you get this kind of through sense of the living room, which segues right out into the screened-in porch area. I think that Finecraft and De Young Studio were a really good partnership, particularly for this project. So we didn't know of Finecraft initially, but we discovered them, Mark and Karen and myself, as we were doing a search for suitable contractors. De Young Studio has a specialty in mid-century modern architecture. We collaborate often with another architect, Robert Arnouts, who coincidentally is my father, and he is has a specialty in mid-century modern also. He was involved in early conversations with Mark and Karen about the design. And one of the things that we were delighted to find is that Finecraft also has a specialty in mid-century modern. So there was a project that Mark and Karen could visit, and that was very selling for them, that they were able to see firsthand, here's a builder who gets it. So there's a lot that goes into mid-century modern work, and whereas a lot of contractors always say that drywall is kind of a forgiving product. You really can cover a lot of sins with drywall. In mid-century modern work, there's a lot of woodwork, there's a lot of trim, there's a lot of alignments, and there's really not a lot of room for fudging. And so seeing that Finecraft was capable of doing this kind of work was very reassuring for me, and I knew that we would have a good relationship, and we really did. So I think Mark and Karen are surprisingly even more delighted with the house than they thought that they would be. They've said to me several times that they They knew what it would be like, that I had created 3D models that really showed so well exactly what they could expect out of the house and out of the design. It's interesting because having a bathroom so close to the foyer was a concern. So at the same time, we took the design approach that this is something that will be seen, and so we are going to play with it and use a wonderful material that, sort of wall tile in the way that was done in the 1960s. So then moving into the living room and then becoming aware of that stacked stone fireplace and the kind of the peekaboo pass through into the kitchen, and then the kind of wonderfully playful, colorful cabinets in the kitchen that you kind of get a peekaboo view of. It was all designed as a sequence that you experience, and the house sort of unfolds for you with that view to the park as you move into it. So, and then culminating, of course, in that little focal point library at the back of the house, which is all window, and for Mark and Karen is really their favorite space, and they spend hours there reading, and so do their cats, and that for them both, they said to me this was really a mark of success that the cats had endorsed the design. All told, it was a really wonderful project. This is a joy for me to work on, and I really enjoyed working with Finecraft, and of course Mark and Karen are just wonderful clients.